ubi venit plenitudo temporis, when the fullness of time had come. This falls well as we draw to the closing seconds of this year. Years ago, I went up to my novice master and opened my heart to him on one or two problems and doubts, and he said to him, there's no point in worrying about the future. It'll probably be quite different from what you even imagine. That applies to each one of us here, as indeed to every inhabitant of time. This probably was the last thing that would have come to the mind of all these three in this little snap. You may not be able to see who it is at a distance. You may just pick out John Paul II, fairly young as a pope still, and a fairly young Ratzinger next to him, and between them a much younger Giorgio Bergoglio, having a chin word in the Vatican, unaware that they were three popes to be, one a saint already. And time is rather like that. We calculate and program and waste energy on what will never be. But there is another sort of wastage I'd want to discuss for a few moments as we conclude this year together. It's the big way in which the whole planet, at least in the civilized world, is ruining time. This is what my grandfather would have had in his pocket on a Sunday morning. It's one of the old sort. Or to be honest, it's an imitation of the old sort. But what was sticking around in this instrument, or its equivalent, over generations gone by, would be passing at the same velocity as our time, and yet not exactly. I remember in my childhood and young days, I'd go, as I was bound to, with my family and my grandfather to the chapel. In those days, things hadn't changed in the Welsh nonconformist world, and the service was always an hour long, and a long, long sermon, of course all in Welsh, and we boys would look hard at the clock, passing second by second. I won't go into parentheses what we used to get up to make it hurry up. But we could actually hear time pass, and the same applied to the prayer meetings on a Thursday evening. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. Time was slower. And in those days, there was no means of hurrying it up. Games weren't simple. And often one would complain that one was bored and that time was dragging. However, one experienced time. One felt the moments passing. And also, although a child, I was actually a bit in touch with my thoughts, because they were not being invaded all the time by others. We didn't actually have a television for quite a long time in childhood. Compare. Now, if one observes how people will have spent this last year of 2014, it will be essentially not aware that time was going at all. Why? You fill the mind to the maximum, and time is not felt until it's gone. Moreover, and this is where I want to land, there is an illness which we do not have to have. how many of us over this last year have been racing against the clock? Is it true? As though all we had to do was beat the clock, beat the clock, beat the clock. Well, we'll end up in that situation, beaten by the clock and falling in the grave out of breath. All we've done is rush from A to B and landed at the end of our innings, having missed the point. Now, in the monastic world, none of that exists, at least in the classic, pure monastic world. Why? At least, I say, in the pure one has only one's interior life. But there is no need for it to be either or. The structure of each soul here is exactly the same. And we need to take the same care of our soul as long as we have it in our possession in time. Because the quality of our time is going to be, let's face it, the quality of our eternity. And we only have one chance. So, before this year comes, sit and calculate. How am I going to spend it? There are a few tricks. One enemy of the soul is the itch always to do everything that crosses its mind. As though we were commissioned by God to do everything that crossed our minds. We don't have to. We don't have to, for instance, engage in a conversation and remain engaged after it's lost its utility. One can do more in a quarter of an hour than in 3 hours, quite often, in conversation. One does not have to accept every invitation. One does not, out of courtesy, have to sit down and look at an object which is not even a human being, I mean a television program. One does not have to be in a place where one's mind is being invaded by a machine, where there is noise being pumped at us. We do not have to be in the company of people who are in mode of agitation all the time. We have the right to choose our company and therefore our quality of time. We do not, and this is a big one, have to have all the time our mobile phone in on mode, because that's a huge victory for the enemy of the soul. People who are controlled by one object and do not know how to control it. I remember the prior in Italy saying one time, "Je ne veux pas être esclave du téléphone. I do not want to be a slave of the telephone." That was before mobiles came in. He would not even dream of having access to him by email. He said, if they want to get me, they can get me by another means. In other words, he could foresee what all this extra in the way of words coming into the closure of the monastery and the mind were as regards devastation of the interior sphere. The virgin soul is prostituted to the media and the waves of the air. It's everybody's and nobody's, and last of all its own. And where is God in the noise of the airwaves that henceforth are inside it? The soul is inquinated by too many words. And even children are devastated by this little gadget and do not know how to play the simple games which have come down as far as the Middle Ages from us. How many play simple games and hand them on? Hopscotch, conkers, marbles, stuck in the mud, all the golden oldies. No, let's have a gadget, the latest gadget. And then we are piped up and unable to sit with the beauty of a word or a book. We are damaging our peace, we're all up against it. I just conclude, in the monastic world, time is felt, time is heard. Words have echoes, and echoes of echoes. In the world, we are superficial if we're not careful. So I'd offer two thoughts, one on one page and one on the other. Hurry, hurry. Well, do we have to? And the other is the monastic world, just hearing time at the altar and inquire. Lots and lots of time, which you too can have if you want, and if you simplify the operation of existence. Fewer words mean more powerful words and deeper echoes on the sound. Hurry. A haste is but a waste of running time, and little was done well that was done ill, for that the hour bid it happen. Moments climb too quickly round the uncaring face that still has care enough to tap a little more again, a little less again, less than before we had, than when we had this restlessness. For there are moments that need time to be, and we are fully made when made to stand upon a moving aeon that can see whence it has come into this ringing land that has too many confines to be crossed at walking pace, with just a moment lost. High Mass towards the Orient. There is a peace upon the earth at last, and skies have time to be. There is no haste or matter great to work, for we have cast our anchor in the deep, and we have faced the Godhead in full force. We have held high the Lamb upon his throne. Nay, we did own the voice that he had not, and did bend nigh all particles that some were better shown. For 'twas a miracle that moved my feet in distant days evangelic to this place of mighty Roman air, and I now meet in inches for my face a hallowed space, where gaze did gaze at gaze upon this land, where man alone with you all alone, did stand.